Thank you everybody who's come tonight in this busy time of the year. And I'm also addressing this to the people in the Cyberland, so welcome. This is a special time of the year where there's a lot of hustle and bustle, and one can get distracted by the, if you like, the commercialization of Christmas. And it nevertheless is a time of giving. And I point towards the bowl over there, if you'd like, on your way out, to support the work of Jude and the building here. So this is part two of a very deep orientation towards what we need to do to purify ourselves in the Rose Cross meditation, but also how do we orientate ourselves to find the Christ birth in Christmas, which is also a metaphor for how that can be within us.
I will start with the verse. Heilsam ist nur, wenn im Spiegel der Menschenseele sich bildet die ganze Gemeinschaft und in der Gemeinschaft lebet der Einzelseele Kraft. The healthy social life is found when in the mirror of each human soul the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the community the virtue of each one is living.
Thank you, Karen. And just to remind us, in case you've got the phones on, please turn them off. And also, in terms of building community, there's a Christmas course offered on the 26th December from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at Avon Street, which is a place where Christmas is opened by name. And the content is over a new world that is such people in it. What happens when, like Prospero, we lay down our power and privilege? And then also in the evenings between the 26th and 30th of December, from 5 to 6:30 p.m., the Holy Nights will be and that's here. So the brochures are the offerings for.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming out this evening, and thanks for the introductions and the music and all the announcements. So tonight we're going to try and find a bridge, possibly to last week's lecture. It's not essential to have heard it. That may or may not eventuate. But tonight I've called my lecture, What Happens at Christmas? So I'm going to, again, just start by acknowledging the land we live in here, Gadigal, the Eora Nation. We are in a season at the moment, which is the warm and wet season. It's called the season of Paradui. Now, for those who don't know what Paradui is, it's the dreaming of the Parramatta River. So the Parramatta Eels, if you're a rugby fan, is interesting that it is the eel that comes down from Parramatta. The top end of the river is the eel. And this is the time of the year where they swim downriver. It's the hot, wet season, and they swim out the heads, and they actually swim all the way over to New Caledonia, where they spawn, and then they die. And the young ones find their way back to Australia without their parental migratory leadership. And then they come up the rivers, and not necessarily like the salmon that always go to their same spawning area. Mysteries. But it's also the time of the year where, if you've been walking around, you will see here on the East Coast, and especially around Sydney, a very beautiful tree that we call the Port Jackson fig tree, which we sometimes confuse with the Moreton Bay fig tree, which is a much bigger cousin of the Port Jackson fig tree. And it's a wonderful tree because just around this time of the year it blossoms, and you have this large sort of firmament, this round, beautiful, almost like the skies with these yellow stars blossoming on it. And then not too long from now, it fills with the fig trees. And as we go into the hot season, we can sit under these fig trees, and we are fed, and the birds are fed, and it becomes a place of teaching and refuge. That's a sort of a summer imagination that we might find has a relationship to what we're going to talk about tonight. The green tree with the stars on it that then nourishes our humanity in wisdom could be seen as a Christmas theme of Sydney's Indigenous culture. So I'm going to take us through, again, 4 steps. We're going to start off the evening by talking a little bit about the 3 meetings that we have as human beings in our life with the spiritual world. We're going to talk about the 3 births of Christ in history, which is different to the pre-earthly deeds of Christ. That's slightly different. We're then going to talk a little bit about a Christmas tree, see if what we can bring to consciousness there. And then I will talk at the end about the Southern Hemisphere. How do we find Christmas in the South? One of the things that I've sort of over many years, some of you may know, I've written a book on this, but on further reflection, I think that in the Southern Hemisphere, to find the Christmas expression of any of the festivals, they are actual song lines in the stars. And these song lines give us in the Southern Hemisphere a relationship to the seasonal and the Christmas and the Christian festivals as we go from season to season. It's called the Decans, D-E-C-A-N-S. If we follow the decans of the signs of the zodiac, we can find some windows into the mysteries of the North and the Southern Hemisphere working together in the festivals. So that's what we're going to try and get through tonight. Let's see how we go. So what are these 3 births of Christ? I'll read them to you because it's really quite a simple thing. Rudolf Steiner refers to it as Johannes Tauler in Germany, when the Christmas tree was just coming into existence in Christianity. People think the Christmas tree was an early Christian symbol. It wasn't. It's only been a very popular Christmas symbol for the last 200, 300 years. Before that, it was a pagan symbol, and we're going to explore a little bit how that happens. But Johannes Tauler talked about that Christ was thrice born. So once he came from the Father, from the great world all. Secondly, God descended to humanity, assuming the sheaths of human incarnation. And thirdly, that Christ will be born in each human soul, able to find the inner potential to unite with divine wisdom and give birth to higher individuality. Later in the lecture, he comes back to that and says, Christ is born 3 times. So not God, but Christ is born 3 times. Once into the eternal Father, who enlivens the world, weaving throughout creation. So the creator aspect. Once as a human being at the start of Christianity. And thirdly, ever again in the souls of those who awaken within themselves the world of spirit. Without this last birth, Christianity would be incomplete, and anthroposophy would be unable to encompass the Spirit of Christ, were it not to understand what it signifies that the Word, resounding to us year after year, should remain no more theory or doctrine, but bring its warmth, light, and life, so that through this power we bring the vitality of spirituality into the world, incorporating it and ourselves into eternity. So there's a bit of a thought to have, that if we really want the spiritual world to survive, and if we want the teachings of anthroposophy to go forwards, we need to understand this ongoing birth of the Christ being. So at once, the first birth, when the world was being created, the Christ being was born into the Father, the ground of the world, so that creation could come about. Secondly, in the Christ Jesus that we know from the Bible narrative 2,000 years ago, and now in the sense of being in the Holy Spirit, being born within the human being. And how do we do that? How do we, at this time of the year, how do we use the start of the year, the Christmas mystery, to help us experience and develop that awakening of the warmth, the light, and the life of the spiritual world in our consciousness? So what is he talking about there when he speaks of warmth, light, and life? So he speaks about this, that we can acknowledge that each of the great rounds of the Earth's evolution, so 7 great evolutionary processes of consciousness, which in his language, in anthroposophy, the first one we call the ancient Saturn. And in the ancient Saturn, warmth became. And then we went into the second round, which was called the ancient Sun. And the mission of the ancient Sun was to bring light. And then we moved into the third great planetary cycle of consciousness, the ancient Moon, which was to bring about life. So from warmth to light to life are the preconditions of us being able to work as human beings in this particular round of consciousness that we call the Earth. In the future, it'll be called the ancient Earth, when it's no longer here. Hopefully it's not next week or next decade. We in our imaginations and in anthroposophy, we're talking about great numbers of thousands of years that we will still be able to work on the Earth, and we have every intention to do so by bringing this warmth and light and life through us into the next step of this earthly evolution. And so what is this 4th step of consciousness that is developing? And it's quite simple and very complex and inexplicable. It's called love. We don't know how to love, actually, not very well. We might know a little bit about love, but generally we have not yet fulfilled our mission to love well. So where we can really completely imbue every aspect of the world with love. But to bring at Christmas time this sense of warmth and light and life into our hearts, so we can be inspired to bring forth from us this capacity ever anew, in a way that love, because that love is evolving, that love is emerging from us. And we still have a fair while to go before we have really been able to express that. If anyone doubts that, look at the news to see how much we love each other. So we have these three births, okay? These three births of Christ, and this third one is an ongoing process in relationship with the human being. And this process of the birthing of the Christ within us, in our consciousness, is something that we need to explore through these three meetings. So the next step that I'm going to take through us too, so I actually did number 2 first, the three births of Christ, but these three meetings that Rudolf Steiner talks about in our human biography. And this part is that as we evolve through these great cycles of time, in that ancient Saturn, the foundations of the physical body were created. On the ancient sun, the etheric body was given form and substance. On the ancient moon, the astral body was created, and now we are busy creating the ego, or the self, the I am of the human being. So this individuation process, where we are veiled off from that warmth, light, and love that have come through that, but are inherent in our physical, etheric, and astral bodies. But we still have 3 future steps, and these future steps in the Eastern tradition were known as manas, buddhi, and atman. In anthroposophical or Western philosophical terms, Steiner has called them the development of our spiritual self, our life spirit, and our spiritual human being, the highest development. But they are not yet fully present in us. There's a part of our life in our biography where maybe after the age of 42, we begin to have inklings of how we are graced from the spiritual world with being able to develop the spirit self and the life spirit and the spirit human being up until about the age of 63 and further on. But when Steiner speaks about that in biography, you know, he says early in life we have these 7-year periods, and they're fairly structured and fairly formed. Once we get past 42, as we go through the Mars phase and the Jupiter phase and the Saturn phase of that third 21-year period, it's not so clearly cut 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. So people say, I'm 49, I'm going into my Jupiter wisdom phase. No, you're not. No, maybe. But you might still be struggling with your Mars phase, and Saturn phase might already be hitting you as well. So it's much more fluid than it's exactly to that rhythm, because we're not yet fully able to, as human beings, touch into that, because that place, those 3 phases will be developed in the next 3 huge rounds of Earth. In the Jupiter round and the Venus round and the Vulcan round, we will develop these 3 higher aspects of our human being. And they are at this point, Steiner says, you know, because we are so veiled from the spiritual world, we need as human beings to kind of be given an inkling of that. We need to be sort of nurtured towards it already now. We already need to touch into it. And so this higher spiritual worlds in the first hierarchy, the 3 ranks above the human beings, hold within themselves, in their own essence, that which we would become. So the angels already have developed in themselves a spirit self. The archangels have developed a life spirit, and the archai, the spirits of personality, the time spirits, have developed the Atman, the spirit human being. And they shine that into us so that we can, in a way, it can be kind of the seed that is within us can be watered and given manure and slowly germinated within us at this point, but not fully unfolded. And we are given the grace through the spiritual worlds, these three meetings that Steiner talks about in his lecture cycle, the building stones for an understanding of the mystery of Golgotha. He talks about quite over a number of lectures about these things. I'm going to try and give a bit of an overview of these meetings. So the first meeting is one where we are given the grace under the leader of the angels, who's known as the Holy Spirit, by the way. And these angels allow us, our angel allows us every night when we go to sleep to touch into the spirit self. So every night when we go to sleep, we need to develop kind of a reverence and awe that tonight I'm going to go and I'm going to be in the heart, in the bosom of my angel, where I will be able to breathe a little bit of the essence of the spirit self of the human being that will unfold. That is the realm of the Holy Spirit. The third one, I'm going to come back to the second one because that's the one we want to deal with. The third one happens once in a lifetime where we meet the divine ground of the world, the Father ground of the world. And this is a once in a lifetime, maybe 2 or 3 experiences around the 35-year mark. So the middle point of our destiny, we are given a moment where we will experience the oneness of everything. This is we could say the esoteric understanding of monotheism. So it's not one God, but it is everything is in unity. Everything is, we are all bound in experience. So it's a very indigenous experience that the trees and the animals and the rocks and the landscapes and the rivers are me. The Sufis also say that. That am I. That am I. And we have an existential experience. We are graced with this existential experience once in our lifetime, at least once, to know that experientially, that I can feel myself bound into the unity of everything. And that gives us a certain experience around that. And I'll give something that I think has to do with Christmas. I think it's important for us to understand this for Christmas, because of course the question happens, which is happening right now in our time. And when Steiner was talking about this, it was happening it was the First World War. And he said, what about young people who die before they have this experience? Are they not allowed to meet the Father God? You know, is that just tough luck? You didn't make it that far. And he says, no, that's not how it happens. What happens is that a person who dies before the age of this moment of meeting this unity of everything, that the archai, that the spirits of personality give to us, they have it in the hour after their death. So a young person, so let's stop for a moment. How many young people have died in the last year, just this last year? Lots. There's always lots of children or people under the age of 35 dying, but at this point, a lot are in our minds. Let's put it that way. They're sort of through the Ukraine, through what's happening in Palestine, Sudan. I mean, there's just many places where young people under the age of 35 are dying. And he says, imagine that in the hour after their death, at the place where they die, they are graced this experience of knowing the unity. And that creates an inscription in the place where they die. Could be. My understanding of the near-death experience is it's much more personal than universal. It can be, of course, that someone has that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, there is some variation, but it's
Sure.
very, very
Sure. I am sure that some people who have had a near-death experience may have had an experience of that, and they would come back with that. When they come back, they come back with that knowing. That knowing, yeah. So, yeah. But the point, if they don't come back and actually have a death experience, that where they died, there is an inscription into the landscape of the unity of humanity and everything. That is inspiring. It's like an altar. It creates an altar in the place where they are. So that's maybe something is birthed. Something of a light goes up in the place where people under the age of 35 die. So that's an interesting thing. I just had an experience of a young man, 19 years old. He died on the Balmain Peninsula. 19 years old. So is there now? Can we feel that in the hour after his death, something was dropped into this place of the Gadigal people, of the Eora people, of our place where we live, that would bring an understanding, like an inspiring understanding or a grace or a light for the people who live in that place? It's just something to try and live with as a possibility, or as a way to possibly. It doesn't do away, and we should not think it does away with the trauma and the unwantedness of these kinds of deaths, and we have to deal with all the dark side as well. So it's not sort of saying, oh, it's all good because this also happens, but we can maybe lift ourselves out of only seeing the horrible side of it to understand that the spiritual world graces us also then with people who have died who are younger. They then have a mission to carry across the threshold all these desires of what should be in our humanity, like love. So could I speak, please? Thanks. There'll be time for questions at the end. Thank you. So when we have the second experience of the that is given to us, it is the archangels. So once a year, we get to experience the Son, the Christ being, and it is on the Holy Night. So on the 24th of December, there is a special moment in the cycle of the year, and it's bound into nature. It is bound into the earth at a particular point of a relationship with the sun to the zodiac, where Steiner calls these, or the initiates used to call these dead spaces, where the rhythms of the world don't match up quite correctly. So the 12 days of Christmas is in archetype the difference between the sun year and the moon year. 364 days and 356 days is about 11 days between these two cycles that we need to take into account. And there's a gap, a bit like the 29th of February every 4 years. It's a bit where human calculation can't actually fit it in. So we have to do something to catch up. And in these places are special moments for us to be able to approach something of the revelation of the Spirit. And at this time, this particular time, on the Holy Night, on the 24th of December, it used to be called Seeing the Sun at Midnight. We can draw close to the Christ being because the sun is in a very particular relationship to the earth. There's a very closeness of the sun's spirit to the earth, who can speak to us if we are listening. And it's important for us to in a way hear that at Christmas time, because that then unfolds through nature. That then unfolds. It unfolds whatever we manage to conceive in ourselves at Christmas time, unfolds on the 21st of March or Easter, and unfolds a further step on the next solstice on the 21st of June or St. John's. And a third unfolding happens at the following equinox on the 21st of September, or Michaelmas at that time. And there's a kind of a process by which we can go from this moment of drawing towards us this experience of the being of love once a year, and allowing it to unfold through as an impulse in our life, through the living of the festivals through the year. So it's bound into the seasonal festivals, but it's also bound into the Christian markings that have been wisely put there by the great initiates of the past. You know, there's a great voice to say that Christmas wasn't on the 24th of December. It was, if you calculate it, but it was put on the 24th of December, not to override the Sol Invictus of the Roman rituals, but because it was a really important moment to be able to hear the spirit of the sun for the people who were taking into them, living the seasonal and the annual cycle of the Christian festivals. So those three experiences, I'm going to try and build now onto that. This particular one, what happens at Christmas time? How do we, one, hear, allow our hearts to hear or have an experience of that being around Christmas time? I mean, as Chris said, when it's a really busy time. It's quite difficult to spend 5 minutes a day being quiet, let alone going into the dark like they would be able to do in Europe. It's a very different experience in the north, where the natural season supports that experience of going inwards. We have a different experience of that here in the south. It's possible, but what can we do about that? So I would like to just go to the third part of this now, which is a little bit about the Christmas tree. And I have to confess, I don't like Christmas trees. I have lots of difficult experiences around Christmas trees. However, this year I'm a reformed person. Because of this, what I'm going to talk about now. And it's thank you to Dr. Rudolf Steiner and his understanding that he brought about it. But he said, when you look at the Christmas tree as a symbol, what does it represent? Why has it emerged, say, from 1600, where it was in the little Rhine Valley, and then suddenly Goethe brings it into the beginning of the 19th century, and then suddenly it's a universal symbol that isn't always perfect. But what is a Christmas, what does the Christmas tree do? It takes something from outside in nature, so a bit like the Christmas tree that we drew last week. If you remember the Christmas tree that we had here last week, it looked something like this. That's the 7-pointed star with the eyes on the planets on it. Saturn, Sun, Moon. Rudolf Steiner calls that the Lamb of God, and he puts an eye onto each of the points, and he puts the 7 planets onto each of those points, which is kind of how he decorates the Christmas tree. When he brings the anthroposophical decoration of the Christmas tree, he puts the 7 planets on the Christmas tree, and he puts symbols on that represent the evolution of humanity on it, and candles and roses and a star on the top. Why? Because that's one of the ancient traditions. In the ancient pagan traditions, they didn't necessarily bring in a tree, but they brought in a branch, and they hung the branch over the Yule log, and they burnt the Yule log, which was about the death, the ashing, and the light and the warmth coming in, and the life. But it was green, and the green was there to represent a sense of eternal life, not just as evergreen, but it was a representation of the eternal life. And they put symbols on these branches that represented what they wanted the gods to bring to their community that year. Yeah, what did they want, like this coming year? And it was this time of the year around the 24th of December through the Holy Nights, where there was this gap between the years, between the sun and the moon years, there was this gap that the leaders of the community, the priests of the mysteries, could listen. And they could listen to the revelation out of the sun spirit, and they out of that, they then structured the social forms for the coming year. They structured the social forms, the rules, and the things that the community would need to do to grow together for the next 12 months. So, early Christianity didn't do that, but for the last few hundred years, we have started to do that. We have started to see, we bring in a pyramid-shaped tree. Doesn't matter that it's not from Australia, actually. Just get over it. It's a pine tree. It's a pyramid-shaped tree. It doesn't have to be, if you want a green tree, bring in a Port Jackson fig tree into your house. A bit harder. But you could bring in a Christmas bush. You could bring in a native cherry, something that is green and doesn't lose its leaves in that way, in that same way, where you bring this vital life into your home and you start putting decorations on it. If you're a bit more traditional, you might just put glossy balls on, like the planets. And you might put stars on. Not that far different from the anthroposophical Christmas tree. Why? In its design, very different. But in its gesture, it creates a warmth. And Rudolf Steiner said that the reason why this symbol has re-emerged into Christianity is because it unites the people who are around it in a sense of warmth and light and life. It arouses within us the preconditions for the souls. And so you can go to Madison Square Garden, you can go down to Cockle Bay, there's a beautiful tree. And it's actually quite wonderful. I walk past it every day on my way to and from work. And it's a beautiful plastic tree with interesting big balls on it in a spiral around the tree. And it's wonderful to see the people stopping and looking at it. And you sort of wonder, are they getting a sense of the warmth preparing for Christmas that is a preparation for this nighttime experience on the 24th of December? So I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise now, because this is me being me. I've decided this is what I'm going to do, so you're going to do it too. I thought, I've got a Christmas tree at home. Well, we've got a Christmas tree at home, and it's a beautiful Christmas tree because it doesn't take long to put up. And it's a part of my beef with Christmas trees is they take a lot of effort to put up. No, it's plastic. And it's got electric lights on it, and it's got little baubles on it. And every night I sit there and I turn it on, I turn off the lights, and every morning when I get up, I sit in the dark and I turn it on, and I let that light warm my heart. And it does. Sorry, you might not believe me, but it does. So what I've been thinking is that this year, instead of just putting baubles on it, I actually want to put, like the pagans, my wishes for the coming year. So I've got some Christmas decorations here, and I'm going to give you each one. You might want to, or you may not want to participate in this exercise. You might want to do it now. I haven't got pens for you, so you might have to do this at home. And I want you to take this beautiful star that represents the human being, 5-pointed star, bought at the reject shop down in Broadway. And there must be some more here. And write what you wish to see happen in the world this coming year. There must be a second bag of them somewhere. Well, there can't be 20 given out already. Sorry to those on cyberspace. You can sit there and write your own questions. Maybe someone could help me with this. Can you just get more out. Who hasn't got one yet? Chris, there's some more. Some more are coming that way. And just think what you would like to see happen in society, in the world in 2025, and put it on your Christmas tree, if you have a Christmas tree. If you don't have a Christmas tree, go get one. No, I'm only joking with that, but at least put it somewhere in your window or something. But it's this idea of dreaming. What would you see? So, for example, one of the things that I've been working on in the last while would be a wish for 2025, and this is a Steiner wish, it's a Steiner prayer. He says, "Grant unto others that which you wish for yourself." Mr. Israel, Mr. Russia, Mr. Whoever it is. Grant unto other communities what you wish for your community. So you want to be sovereign? Well, why can't the Palestinians be sovereign? Why do you have the right as a nation to stop them? That's my wish, individually, but also then possibly, internationally. And if we put those out as wishes at this time of the year, what can happen? What can happen? So there's a little thought of how we could transform, how I have transformed my relationship to the Christmas tree in that sense. And it struck me on the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. Has anyone ever wondered why? I've never understood that until this year. A partridge in a pear tree. Well, a pear tree in most cultures has to do with fertility. The pear is the shape of the feminine form. It is a long living tree. It is a symbol of longevity and eternity. And a partridge is a being that will sacrifice itself for its young. So the Christ, and it's not a tree bird. It's an earth runner. You don't find partridges in pear trees. So that just doesn't happen. So what is this being that is an earth being that can sacrifice itself, suddenly appearing in the symbol of eternity? Is that a symbol of a Christmas tree in a completely English way? I haven't gone into the second day of Christmas and what all those mean, but this one made sense so far. So, yeah. All righty. So those are the sort of introductory thoughts. I have no idea how I'm running on the time. 7:45. So how do we try to find this in the hot summer days? What do we do in the Southern Hemisphere to be able to find that warmth, that inspiration? Maybe a tree will help you, maybe it won't. Maybe it's a crib that helps you. Maybe it's going to Mass or the Christian community for a midnight service that allows us to drop into that peaceful place where we can feel that warmth and the light and the life, bringing us to experience this Christ expression of the development of the love of the human being. How do we do that here in the South? Because our nature isn't necessarily so helpful as the European or the Northern Hemisphere dark winter night where it's much more conducive. So I have worked with this. We have 4 quarters in the year. We are now in the quarter that started on the 1st of November, centers itself around the 21st of December, and transitions on the 1st of February. So there's about 6 or 7 weeks either side of those. It's a 13-week kind of period where in the pagan world you have the sun festivals, which are the solstices and the equinoxes, and you have the fire festivals. The fire festivals are 1st of November, 1st of February, 1st of May, 1st of August. They are the sort of the life cross around the solid cross of the sun festivals. In the stars above us, we see the sun moving in this time through Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, when we hit the Holy Night and the 12 days of Christmas is Capricorn, and then just before we transition, we go into Aquarius. Now, one of the things that I've tried to understand this very complicated indication by Rudolf Steiner is that we live on the whole earth, and because we experience the earth as a sphere, we've now experienced that the earth goes around the sun. That has emancipated the earth from the cosmic forces, and we have become custodians of understanding the earth as a whole entity. This is a new form of the emergence of love. So, you know, we have the tradition that we feel agape is the height of love. When we get agape, then we've reached the end of the Gospel of John. But agape needs to transform other forms of love. So, for example, there is a sense of responsibility now emerging in our love to what is called biophilia. So biophilia means the love of life. And at first, that's instinctual. But we've actually gone through a time where we have biophobia. There are a lot of people who are really scared of life and nature. And we have to generate ourselves a conscious relationship to being responsible, to loving the animals again, and the environment and the landscape. And this is an emerging sense of how do we do that. And Rudolf Steiner talks about this responsibility to the earth as here in the Southern Hemisphere, in each of these seasons, so from what we call the December period, it's summer here in the south mostly, and it's winter mostly in the north, unless you live in, you know, Egypt. It's not necessarily that cold and snowy at this time of the year. It can be quite warm. Or, you know, if you go a little bit further south into Bali or Singapore, you're not going to get a classical winter in the northern hemisphere. But it's this gesture that there is the cooling down in the north and the expansion into the south. And Steiner speaks about how each of these seasons is governed by an archangel. So each season, the cosmic forces are brought to the earth in an alchemical process between what's happening on the earth, what's happening in the stars, and what happens for the human beings through an archangel. And so we have at this time of the year in the north, where it's winter, the archangel Gabriel, who is traditionally the archangel who announces the birth. Here in the south, we have the summer archangel of Uriel. But now the interesting thing that Steiner speaks about this is that how the archangel facilitates the energies of the alchemy of the earth's natural season, the cosmos flowing in through the sun, how the archangel does that in the north creates certain cosmic imaginations. And he's given a very powerful lecture cycle on those 4 imaginations. In the 5th lecture of that, he then goes into some detail and saying, when the archangel then of winter, or let's say the archangel of summer, who was up in the north in June, comes down to the south in the southern summer, how they work is different to how they work in the north. And he explains the difference. He actually gives different symbols, and he says they work into the human constitution. So in the north, these cosmic imaginations are delivered to humanity to help us draw in and unfold this Christmas experience of the birth, and then through Easter, St. John's, Michaelmas, these archangels in the north help us in that unfolding. And those come to the whole earth. They go through the earth and we feel them. So it's not bad to actually have a crib that has snow on it, because somewhere there is snow on the earth. It's just not here. But it could be in Wellington. It could, you know, it could be in Hobart. There could be snow. I mean, it's snowed in Hobart on Christmas Day before. It's unusual, but it's not unknown. So it's not located. But here in the south, these 4 archangels, when they are facilitating the forces of the stars and the sun into the human being, they transform the human constitution. And this is the principle of Waldorf education. You don't bring a consciousness in if the constitution isn't ready for it. And so we have a task in the Southern Hemisphere to help the constitution of the human being to keep unfolding and becoming open to be able to receive these great cosmic imaginations. And when we have here in the south summer, Uriel's in the south, and the place that Uriel, I'm not going to go through all four of them, it's way too complicated, but the place that Uriel works, draws the cosmic forces through the sun into the southern hemisphere, is into the nerve sense system. Raphael is in the rhythmic system, Gabriel is in the metabolic system, Michael is in the musculoskeletal system. Just if you want to know, I won't go into the full detail of that. But now we have a time here in the summer where Uriel is drawing the forces from Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and raying them through the alchemy of the summer forces that are different in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, South America, Antarctica. These alchemical forces of the summer, they inspire these forces into the human being so that the metabolic, the nerve sense system can be rejuvenated and can grow a little bit. And he says that goes through the earth, and the people in Germany also get that from us, through us. It comes through our celebration of Christmas that the constitution of all human beings on the earth are changed through Christmas in summer. Just as we receive the imaginations of the Christmas imagination through the earth into the south, and these two meet, consciousness and constitution. So how do we find in the southern hemisphere this journey? What does these deacons, so I have to explain deacons. If you imagine the zodiac, this belt of stars through which the planets move, here, this is the zodiac, and north and south of the zodiac, you have what are other constellations. So you have things like the Southern Cross, the Centaur, Orion. You have Perseus, you have Cepheus and Cassiopeia and Andromeda, and Pegasus. All these different stories that are north and south of the zodiac are part of the mystery. And here in the southern hemisphere, while the sun is moving through these constellations and goes through the holy nights, we see just south of them constellations, and one is called the altar. So at the tail of Scorpio, there is the altar. There are four, because they're alchemical symbols in the southern hemisphere that we move from. So Steiner talks about how these archangels work differently. One of the imaginations he gives, he says, at the beginning of summer, so November, as we're coming out of the springtime, where Raphael was working in the south, Raphael meets with Uriel and hands him this golden chalice of energy that has been worked on in the rhythmical system, and he gives it to Uriel, who raises this golden, calls it a bucket actually, this gold, but I'm going to call it a chalice because I don't like the idea of golden buckets. this vessel, this golden vessel of energy that Raphael has worked on in our rhythmical system, and Uriel raises it into our head and performs these transformative things all through this time, to the point where on the 1st of February, Uriel can hand it to Michael as the autumn comes. And then Michael receives it and drops it into our musculoskeletal system. And after that, Michael hands it to Gabriel, who brings it into the metabolic system. And so year by year, we move this golden energy through our constitution. And the stars, these deacons in the south, tell us a story. They tell us a story how from the altar to the phoenix, another alchemical symbol, so the resurrection of a death and resurrection process, there is not a major, but it's a starry constellation that's called the North American Indian. Yeah, I'm calling it the indigenous person. So the First Nations people. And if you know me, every human being is an Indigenous person. Why? Because you were born on the earth. And where you were born is where you're Indigenous to. So don't let anyone tell you you're not Indigenous. You've got a different tradition to the local Indigenous people, but they can work together. And they have to work together. But what is this Indigenous person doing up in the starry sky? So when you look at the sun now, because these are visible in the day, so part of the challenge at this time of the year is to see the stars behind the sun, not the nighttime stars. When we look at the sun at Christmas time, we can see this Indigenous person there. And what's this Indigenous person doing? They are surrounded by birds, lots of birds, the toucan, the peacock, the pigeon, the pigeon or the partridge. And eventually, through this relationship of the human being, this Indigenous human being, to the world of the birds around them, the phoenix can arise. So what was put on the altar at the end of the Michaelmas period now becomes, through this song line, literally as the sun moves through here, a song line is being built, that something moves in us to be born. And this is where we're going to now get complicated, if that wasn't complicated already. So what happens? What happens for the human being as this mystery takes place in the sky? They are relationships in the constitution of the human being that take place between the blood and the nerve system. And in the head, there is the blood and the nerve. We can feel how the energy moves in the blood and the nerve into the senses. And in this very complicated lecture, Art and the Theory of Art, there's 2 lectures that Steiner talks about that are well worth reading, that are called the source of artistic imagination and supersensory knowledge. And he speaks about how in the 4 parts of our body, in the nerve sense system, in the rhythmical system, in the metabolic system, and in the musculoskeletal system, an imbalance. He says if a person is very grounded, they can't be artistic. You have to be a little bit unbalanced to be artistic. And depending on which art you have, so if you have an ability to do music, you would have an imbalance in the rhythmical system between the blood and the nerve system. In the head, where this imbalance happens between the nerves and the blood in the senses, we become poets. So we become people who can speak. So this time of the year is the time where we can learn to transform speech into artistic speech as a capacity. And we could say that part of the Southern Hemisphere songline through the transformation of our Indigenous self, we start to birth within us at Christmas time the universal human being who becomes a wisdom orator, not only a bard or a poet, but someone who can actually speak the wisdom. So for all human beings. So as we celebrate Christmas this year, maybe we can try and tune into this, that if we're working with a Christmas tree, but we're also working with the birth of the life and the warmth and the light into the love, so that we can learn to speak more than just words, but that we can actually start to be wisdom speakers, human beings who are wisdom speakers. And that's my talk. Now, Mishka, you can ask your question. It's gone. It will come.
Yeah, with the 3 meetings, you talked about the one at the age of 35. Do you need to be aware of it? Like, if you're not aware of it, has it happened?
Yes.
Because I personally, I can't.
You can't touch it.
I can't relate to anything at that time. And
Yeah.
But what if you feel that you have an experience of that at a different time of your life? Is that still that meeting?
Yeah. All of that's yes and no. So yes, it is. when we sleep at night, we're not aware of meeting with the Holy Spirit and touching our angel, and yet we have this meeting, and he says we need to develop this reverence of going into sleep and a certain awe coming out of sleep of goodness, I've been there, and with time we may become more conscious of it. And so the same would be in the Christmas experience. And this is why I brought these symbols in, because the symbols and the traditions help us grow towards being able to feel within the warmth and the light and the life experience of a crib or an advent calendar or whatever, to be able to grow more aware of what is happening unconsciously at first. And so too, when we have that in the middle of the year of our lifetime, I've had 3 that I know of, that I can remember. So I'm not saying, I don't think it's just one thing. Steiner says, at 35, and it's prepared from the age of 30. So I think it's a bit more broader than that. And I think he says it is unconscious. He says it is an unconscious experience at first, but we can tap into it. And it could be that you need to sort of practice a little bit of spirit remembering, like how do you actually, you may have had it, but you haven't quite remembered it. But if you sit and, drop into your life story, you might find something emerges. Yeah.
Actually, I had mine at age 15 in Ely Cathedral, but that wasn't what I was going to talk about. More a sort of a fiddly technical question on northern and southern summer and northern and southern winter. It seems to me that the northern summer is seen as the time of unfolding and culminating life, at least in the temperate zone in which these traditions originated. But the southern summer often fulfills the functions of a northern winter.
Absolutely.
Particularly if it's 52 outside and every living thing that's got any sense at all is hiding.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far away from the sun as it possibly can.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly, John. Absolutely. It's, the southern summer is as dangerous as the northern winter for old people.
But also, I'm thinking of it almost in a purely biological sense, but also the southern winter, unless you're in New Zealand, Tasmania, or the Alps, is the time when things come out and when plants grow, and because it rains and it's not unbearably hot anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with that observation.
So those functions
reverse. If one observes a little bit, one can find that in a general sense. I mean, obviously there'll be specifics that contradict that, but yeah, definitely.
Should I come down? I don't know if this is a silly question, but when you said with the 3 meetings and you were talking louder.
So
Sorry.
I can hear it as well, please.
I'm sorry. This might be a silly question, but when you were talking about the 3 meetings and you said that the archive, for example, have their spirit human developed, I was thinking, well, the archive of our times, Michael, is there any kind of connection between our spirit human, which is germinal for most people, I would say, and Michael then?
Yes. I'm sure.
Thank you.
I mean, there are many, many, many billions of archi.
Yeah.
Michael is just an archangel who's acting like one.
He is.
He's not actually an archi yet.
Yeah.
He's just been given the capacity because he's developed that far to work in that capacity. And therefore he has a special mission in connection with us connecting to that for sure. But but all the archi have as their consciousness the spirit human being as their kind of level of consciousness, and these archangels, like the 7 creator spirits who are the sun spirits, they are a quintessence of that for us, revealed through 7 gestures. That's why this Christmas tree of the rose cross that we worked with last week is so important, because we can't hold the whole mystery. We have to go at it step by step. Like we can't go, I've got all the planets in my mind, our consciousness requires a little bit of a sort of a step-by-step education process. That's why the cycle of the year is so important for us. Yeah.
I've been pondering the difference between people dying, possibly World War One, World War II for sure, because that's in living memory, and I know people who witness how they survive and the courage, and some didn't. And now, where there is a lot of hatred in such situation, whether in soldiers or there's, to me, there's something has changed. So I don't know whether what Steiner was saying, which makes sense with this something coming there, because there was the sense of self-sacrifice then.
Yeah.
But people don't want to usually die now, and if they are, then it is out of outrage that they have to die. They don't want to die. So what to make of that difference?
Yeah.
Is that still valid, that something come there to sanctify that place?
Yeah. That's a very pertinent observation. That, I mean, it is a very different world. Steiner's talked about the people being, young people who died out of national passion, which is slightly different to this hatred that you're talking about. It's sort of, there's an intensification of the nationalism, there's an intensification of the dislike of other, let alone just the sense for whatever that I don't know that people gladly went to die in the First or Second World War. But there was a different sense of sacrifice connected to it. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think it's a very important observation, because we could, he talks about how when people die through national passion, it's much harder for these transformations to take place. It's much harder for the angels to come and help a person who has died through national passion, as he calls it, nationalism. And that's a lot is what's happening, is in the name of nationalism. And yet he always talks then about how the spiritual world is extremely creative to find solutions for impossible situations. So we are part of that. I think we are part of that solution, you see. He implores constantly more and more how we, as those who are here, need to actually offer aid to those who have died. And I think in this sense, us understanding these things offers a kind of a light and a blessing possibly towards the people who have died, so that they can find their way still. I think we become part of the solution, whereas in the past it might have been more a spiritual grace. Can we develop a kind of a human grace towards the dead now as well? I think the reading to the dead, funeral services, all these things are really, really important for people who have
There is
deceased.
often the problem died. Oh, sorry. When people have died in violent circumstances, and particularly where, I mean, this was first noticed in World War One, but I'm absolutely sure that that it'd be going big time in Ukraine right now, not realizing that you are dead.
Yeah, but that's another whole. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a very real. Yeah, were you going to ask? Have you been waiting to ask a question?
No, I'm.
Are you just running
the
around?
microphone.
I see you keep coming together, because I think maybe you want to ask a question.
In our own Indigenous location here, there's been a lot of trauma in the First Nations people.
Yeah.
But they had in their spiritual culture a sense of unity. And that residue of the blood that was spilled in those areas is part of our landscape, our spiritual landscape.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what, at this time when there is, certainly we're not spared now with understanding this people coming to pulled out of their body through war. And you've partly answered the question that we actually can support in our consciousness. And that's part of that wish you're putting. I'm not really asking a question, but but
no, I agree with you
reflecting
wholeheartedly.
on that.
We need to redress. I mean, this whole thing of truth telling, this whole thing of acknowledging the reality of what actually happened is part of redressing, re-empowering that.
Yeah. And really, in today, when you're talking about what unifies all this together, this birth of Christ and our connection to humanity, that really trying to find that birth within one as light to shed ray out to the darkness that is part of our time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Brigitte wanted to.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing the picture of the, I suppose, of the four quarters in connection to this Christ impulse that wants to incarnate. And as you were speaking, I had this, I mean, my indigenous part lives in Ireland, which is really interesting. And I seem to come from that culture, despite of growing up in Switzerland. But there was as well this moment, I have this sense that in the old mysteries, they brought this light, because you have as well, I think it's Newgrange, where the sun actually shines onto the central chamber around the 19th of December, just a bit before Christmas.
Yeah.
So there seems to be this harvesting or this holding on to this inner light that seemed then to emerge for the priests at the time. That was one picture. And then I really loved the song lines that you brought in from the Southern Hemisphere, because I've experienced that something changes in my body all the time when spring, summer comes in Australia. There's something within my bones that changes. And I always wondered what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't experience that in the Northern Hemisphere when I'm there.
Yeah, interesting.
And I kept on wondering what it is and why it is and why I have that. So that there's obviously something that really works into our, I mean, if it's our physiology, I mean, the physiology could as well be our spiritual aspects later. I don't know. And definitely with Michael, I mean, working with first class, very strong. There is definitely that that aspect of the muscles. Yeah, I've experienced that too.
Yeah.
So there are some
the capacity to
there are some little nuggets that seem to really resonate. So
thank you.
So lots to ponder all the time. It never ends.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Okay. Should we call it a night? I think we call it a night. Thank you.
Thanks. But actually,
you.